XRP hitting new highs hinges on the performance of Bitcoin and the entire crypto asset class. And we got to focus on what's happening with the altcoin sector, which is why we find ourselves at a crucial moment in the market. This is a truly critical moment for XRP holders. Market fear hasn't been this bad in years. I mean, we're talking since the FTX collapse a few years ago. And altcoins haven't been this suppressed performance-wise in years. Which is why, frankly, it's so impressive that XRP has, frankly, never shown this type of strength in its entire 13-plus year history. Now, that said, of course, XRP, it's never gone on a true face-melting rally without the entire market being hot. In fact, with 16 years of crypto chart history under the belt, you can look back, and you can find actually it's very rare for any cryptocurrency to have a meaningful parabolic rally if the entire market isn't hot. I mean, I can only think of one off the top of my head. I'm sure there have been, X number that have over the years. I'm just saying they're very rare. The one that, for me, that pops into mind is Chainlink. It went on a rally at some point, might have been June or July of 2019. And we were coming out of the depths of the bear market, but nothing was rallying. And so things can do that. Even in bear market conditions, it's exceedingly rare, and it's never happened for XRP, so don't count on it. So that's why I said this moment is crucial. What happens to everything? I mean, whichever way the market goes, so goes XRP. That's the argument that I'm making here. But I still firmly believe that the best is yet ahead. And I'll tell you this too. It occurred to me earlier. So I've mentioned a number of times recently that there are really only a few chart analysts I follow that have flipped bearish or are concerned that we could be entering a bear market. And I share all of their perspectives because I want this thing to be balanced. I want to share all the perspectives, even if they're not what you or I would prefer. But it occurred to me that out of all of the analysts that I follow who have flipped bearish, whether strongly or they just are now for the first time expressing concerns, well, first of all, it's not that many of them, but second of all, none of them, literally zero of them, at least that I follow, are citing macro conditions as to why. They're looking at the charts and completely ignoring key elements that absolutely should be considered when coming to a strong conclusion about what is probable to unfold here. How can you only look at the charts and then say, I strongly believe anything about the market? These are pieces of the puzzle. You're like, no, I'm going to finish the puzzle, but I don't need those pieces. Are you sure about that? You sure about that? Because I'm not sure about that. I think that macro actually really does matter. And that's part of the reason that some people got wrong-footed when they were putting out their analysis in November with, markets cratering down because of the tariff stuff. You were ignoring the actual macro conditions and the reasons that people were behaving like people. I had strong conviction for good reason, and it didn't have to happen to do with what was going on in the charts. It had to do with the fact that it was a unique situation with Trump. We know that he says things that spook markets. In this case, it was the tariff stuff. And I believed that, and rightly so, history's shown at this point, enough time has passed to show that I was correct about this, that he was just speaking ridiculously harshly about the tariffs he was going to impose as a bargaining chip. That was it. It was to intimidate, and he never intended to keep it there. And he's behaved like that a number of times. And so I'm just saying that's just one example, but there are all sorts of things that can be happening on a macro level having to do with liquidity, so on and so forth, that I just feel like it's being ignored by a lot of these doomsayers. So as I'm recording right now, the XRP is $2.21. Bitcoin is at $94,371. And in case anyone's curious, I'll note it's 5:47 p.m. Central Time, Sunday, November 16th, 2025. Market cap for the asset class, it's down to $3.1 trillion. But keep in mind, just a little over a year ago, XRP was 49 cents. Bitcoin was what? I can't remember what it was right before the election, 50 or 60 grand. It's probably somewhere around there. If you want the right number, just look it up. But the market cap for the asset class was like 2.2 trillion. So think about this. We are almost $1 trillion higher than we were just over a year ago. Bitcoin, look at where it is. XRP, look at where it is. And the market, oh my God, extreme fear, the likes of which we have not seen in years. Look at this. This is the crypto fear and greed index. At 10 out of 100, that's extreme fear. And it's been at that level, 10 out of 100, for 2 days in a row. This is exceedingly rare. This is what you see at the depths of, just extreme despair that's not based on historic precedent. Like you do see this. I mean, with the opinions that come out, frankly, anyway. But I'm telling you, like, we never. How are you going to tell me with a straight face we had an actual peak for the market when there was no euphoria? Like, this is just not how market cycles end. It just isn't. It never has been, and it wouldn't make sense to believe that this time is different. So there's this post from chart analyst Decode who said, "I don't care what you think. I don't care about your 2021 fractal. 10 on fear and greed for 2 days in a row is rare and making of a bottom." Yep, I agree with that. I mean, and it's not like we just bottomed at the bottom of a bear market. It's a local bottom, of course, but yeah. And chart analyst Matthew Hyland, he reposted that, and he simply wrote agreed. And yeah, I agree too, because that would be how humans normally behave. I don't think that humans on the whole are just going to start acting different. I think if you have similar situations, have a large enough sample size of humans, they're going to act more or less the same as they did before. Here's a post from chart analyst Mustache. This is the crypto total market cap excluding Bitcoin, so that's the total 2 chart. And he says, hashtag altcoins, that's the generational bottom for total 2. The fear and greed index is at 10. This range around 7 to 10 has always signaled a bottom over the last 7.5 years. This chart plus the index is a big, big sign. So yeah, fear and greed index at this level. And then he's arguing from a chart perspective, come on. And look, altcoins, yeah, they're absolutely suppressed compared to Bitcoin. And I'm just telling you, markets find bottoms. They always find bottoms. And that's why when there are all of these naysayers, last year talking about XRP and they look at the XRP BTC chart, I always admitted I didn't know where the bottom would be, but I said, if you just look at where we are right now compared to last cycle and the cycle before that, you can see markets find bottoms, and we are roughly in that range. It's just obvious. You don't even need to be a chart guy to understand that. It's just exceedingly obvious. So you're telling me we're basically at generational bottoms for altcoins, and what are they just going to fall like another 90% because reasons? Because bear market now? Yeah, I'm not buying that argument. I'm just not buying that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll eat my words. I have no ego, so it won't be that bad for me. But I'm just telling you what I actually think. That's the best I can do, is give you my honest opinion. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I just don't see it. I really don't. Here's a post from on-chain analytics firm Santiment, and they wrote, though not a guaranteed crypto bottom signal, probabilities of a market reversal greatly increases when social dominance for Bitcoin surges. During Friday's dip below $95,000, discussion rates hit a 4-month high, signaling severe retail panic and FUD. Yep, lots of FUD out there. We're way better off than we were just over a year ago, so substantially. My net worth is way higher than it was just over a year ago. People are absolutely freaking out because they don't have proper historical perspective. It's what's happening in the moment. People flying by the seat of their pants. Directionally, whatever's happening in the moment makes them feel things. That's that. If you've been here for a number of years and you've just been positioned, I don't know how you couldn't be better off. If you just had broad exposure and then you've just waited. Now, I understand if you bought more recently, then it goes, yeah, I understand. That can go down. That has happened to me too during my 8 years in crypto. I've had moments like that, yes. But you know what I did? I did nothing. I let time pass, and then my crypto became worth a fortune compared to what I put in. Welcome to investing. Very basic stuff here. Here's a post from a popular chart analyst, Alex Wasey. Started following him more recently, within the last couple months or so. He simply wrote, major rally doesn't announce itself, it just shows up. One breakout can flip the whole market, and most people only realize it after prices are already up 50% to 100%. Many calling this cycle over forget that crypto can go from it's so over to we're so back in an hour. Okay, and so that general sentiment is true. Things happen quickly in crypto. It's only over until suddenly it's not. And one day you wake up and the market's just pumping and then you're all happy again. That is no way to live. Don't have emotions, especially not negative ones, purely based on what the market is doing in a given time period. It just doesn't make sense. Of course, the market's going to go higher over time. So again, if you just have a long enough time horizon, none of this is going to matter anyway, which is why I keep insisting it doesn't make sense. There have been so many moments in the 8 years that I've been in crypto that feel just like this, and none of them were the end of the world, nor is this one. It just isn't. And a lot of people out there need to hear that right now. So please take that to heart. That is the truth. This is no different than the other moments where the people were scared at any point that I've been here over the last 8 years. It just isn't. Number go up. The chart is up and to the right over time. And especially for coins that are functionally useful, like XRP, it couldn't be more obvious. XRP is an early winner of the crypto space. So as more money flows in, yeah, we're still going to be fine. We just don't control when the market pumps. But, and that's why I always say too, even if I'm wrong and we're entering a bear market, I'm still going to win because I'm not going to do anything. I don't get to control that part anyway. So yeah, I'm speculating about whether or not we're actually entering a bear market or not. And I'm entitled to my opinion just like you guys are. But in the end, it doesn't, like if we're entering a bear market, it still doesn't ultimately matter for me because it's not going to change what I do. I'm still just going to hold until I'm enticed to sell one day. That's that. And I can't control that part anyway. Just make peace with that. And then control the part you can control, because basically just about all you can control is whether or not you have exposure to the market when it inevitably does finally rally to the upside. And I want that exposure. So that's why I'll tell you this, even if I believed that there was a very high probability we are entering a bear market, since I wouldn't know for sure, I wouldn't care if I have like 95% sure we're going to a bear market, I wouldn't do anything. Because I want the exposure when it inevitably does go to the upside. And so by removing myself from the situation, I'm removing risk. I'm my own greatest risk when it comes to investing. So to fix that problem, after I buy stuff, I do nothing. And it does work. It just does. Here's a post from Tom Lee. I'm a fan of this guy. The people that don't like this guy, it kind of surprised me. He's got such a high accuracy rating. He certainly was right about the Trump tariff stuff. That was not the end of the world. And everybody in his investment class, which is to say, you know, the CNBC political types, because he is a CNBC pundit. Or I guess they call him contributor. Is that his title? I don't remember. But he was right. And then people in his world, the investing world, they were pretty much all against him. And he's just had a great hit rate, though. And so here's what he's having to say about Bitcoin specifically. And keep in mind, the asset class moves in tandem. So even if you're like me and you care way more about XRP, this matters. And so and this adds perspective too. He says, Bitcoin is a volatile asset. We first recommended Bitcoin to Fundstrat clients. So that's his firm, Fundstrat. We first recommended Bitcoin to Fundstrat clients in 2017. And he notes that they recommended just a 1% or 2% allocation. So real small, basically, you can see it's just like, get off zero, you know, purchase your first coin. Just a little bit of a coin, a little tiny piece of a coin, right? And so a Bitcoin at the time was worth about $1,000, he notes. Since then, it's been 8.5 years, Bitcoin, it's had 6 declines greater than 50%. It's had 3 declines in that time period, greater than 75%. 2025, Bitcoin 100x from our first recommendation. Our takeaway? To have gained from that 100x super cycle, one had to stomach existential moments to hodl. Why? Crypto prices are discounting a massive future, so doubts create volatility. Today, we believe ETH is embarking on that same super cycle. Yeah, and so it doesn't matter if you're pro-ETH or not. I've been holding ETH since 2017, also along with Bitcoin. So I hope he is right about Ethereum. But either way, he's certainly right about the entire asset class, and there are going to be certain winners. I believe XRP is one of them. You know, you pick whichever things you think make sense. That's why I gravitate towards large caps, though, because the world, broadly speaking, agrees. But think about that. Even though Bitcoin is up 100x from when he first advised clients get some exposure to it, there were still 75% drawdowns, and there are multiple drawdowns, even just over 50%. That's a lot of volatility he had to stomach. And so I have been here since 2017, but it was later in the year. So like when I first bought Bitcoin, it was like $6,500 or something like that. Now, obviously, it looks like a steal compared to where we are right now. But I went through everything since then also. In fact, with XRP, I bought XRP and then endured a more than 90% drop, and I didn't sell anything. I'm just still holding it. You know, Because that is what it takes. That is what it takes. Like I knew this getting into crypto. I understood it. It's highly volatile. My conviction is my conviction, though. And I have found that just holding and doing nothing over time, it actually does work. And that's the message he's delivering here. This is what he does for a living, okay? Here's a post from Hunter Horsley, and he's the CEO over at Bitwise. And he said, "We talk about 4-year cycles, but the reality is that model is based on a bygone era of crypto. Since the launch of the Bitcoin ETFs and new administration, we've entered a new market structure, new players, new dynamics, new reasons people buy and sell. I think there's a pretty good chance that we've been in a bear market for almost 6 months and are almost through it. The setup for crypto right now has never been stronger." Okay, I read that and I was like, okay, well, that's definitely a fresh take. I haven't seen anyone claim that we've actually been in a bear market for 6 months now, and that we're just exiting it and about to burst to the upside. That's a new one. You can make the argument, I suppose, but it comes down to the argument of what definitionally is a bear market, because we're all using this term bear market, but different people have different ideas of what that actually is. And so when it comes to, the economy, historically, just broadly speaking, if you have 2 back-to-back quarters with negative GDP, like historically, that would broadly be accepted as the technical definition of recession. And then that's kind of rear-facing. So like after it happens, like, oh, wow, we've been in a recession. Okay. What is that for crypto? Everybody has a different idea of what this means. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm thinking about bear market, I'm thinking about how it has historically been described for the entire history of the crypto asset class. So I don't have weird parameters for what a bear market, broadly speaking, is. And we can have a bigger discussion and really hone in with specific metrics. What does it mean if we wanted to? But I think that we all, I would hope most of us at least, would broadly agree that it's when, it's something that occurs where you get this crazy dramatic drop in market value after peak euphoria. And so if we're just talking about fluttering around roughly sideways, are we sure? Do we agree that's a bear market? Because historically, that's not what we call the bear market. So part of it depends on what you're calling it here. But either way, he's saying, okay, it's not been so hot, but we just had Bitcoin hit a new all-time high last month of $126,000, and that's a bear market. So I'm not saying I buy that part of his argument here. But the part where he's acknowledging things are changing, he's cited macro conditions, various parameters. Sure, totally fair to bring that up. I still think the macro condition that matters the most is what's happening with the business cycle. And of course, that has to do with debt refinancing, pushing the 4-year cycle out to 5-year cycle. I increasingly find that argument created by Raoul Pal, I find that to be increasingly compelling, let's say. The more time passes, the more I'm like, well, because it's either that or this time is different and we're entering a bear market. And I find that more hard to believe, honestly. There's also this from Hunter Horsley. He said, "Here's what I see happening on 4-year cycles. Common view. People believe in 4-year cycles and that 2026 will thus be a down year for Bitcoin. First order effect. People thus sell in 2025 to avoid the down market year. Second order effect. The 2025 sellers cause 2025 to be a down year, thus breaking the 4-year cycles. Third order effect. 2026 is open season. 4-year cycles broken." Okay, so I'll just say this. Even if there is some truth to that particular perspective, and it's not a crazy perspective, I still buy more so into what Raoul Pal is talking about. And again, increasingly as time passes, I'm buying more into that because it's either that or we're entering a bear market, which for so many reasons makes no sense. So there could be people thinking like this. I don't think that's these aren't crazy thoughts right here. His argument that I find least compelling is that we've been in a bear market for half a year. But again, it's semantics, though. You can talk past one another if you're using different, you're using the same words but have different definitions. So it could just be that. Then there was also this from Raoul Pal. Speaking of that, he still believes it. He said, "How I see it," this is part of a longer thread I'm not going through in this video, but he said, "How I see it, the debt refi cycle is the cycle. It always has been. And liquidity is the only way to management. It always has been." So he's arguing the same thing here. It's not that the timing, the length of time is the cycle, even though that's typically what people reference in crypto. What he's saying is that the debt refinancing, that's the metric that determines the length of the cycle. So if this cycle is 5 years, it's not a this time is different type of thing. It's always been the debt refi cycle. It's not like there's just time and then everything else swirls around that and then responds to it. No, It's that there's the debt refi cycle, and then time swirls around that and does whatever it has to fall in line with it. Yes, that I find compelling because there's so much data to actually back that up. That is the thing. And that's the reason also that the 4-year cycle, it has been what it's been right ever since the great financial crisis. And you can even argue how, you can even see rather how traditional finance has responded to that. So to me, it's extremely difficult to dispute that. I think Raoul Paul is correct about that. Here's a post from Merlin the Trader. Says, Bitcoin, the breakdown might be a trap. Price dipped below the wedge, but relative strength index divergence is flashing green. This is where retail sells and smart money loads up. Well, that would make sense to me because the market's in extreme fear. Usually when the market's in extreme fear, the smart money is not in extreme fear. Have you noticed that over the years? Just saying. Market's going even lower. And I was like, yeah, okay. I was like, well, I don't know for sure, but I'm not convinced that it is. And even if we do, it doesn't matter. Because again, my attitude back then was the same as, I don't ever technically know anything for sure, but my conviction is my conviction that let enough time pass, we go higher. So even if we go lower, because I'm probably not buying the exact bottom, and that's the virtual certainty, then you just wait, and then it becomes worth more. This is what I've done with everything in investing. Stock market, crypto, specifically XRP, you name it, that's the thing that works. People just have a hard time doing it. Here's a post from chart analyst Dom. He was warning that Bitcoin, and this is just his warning, could get closer to about $90,000, but he thinks that this could be a local low that's ultimately forming, not the end of the world per se. Here's a post from Crypto Wizard. Bitcoin, he says, decision time. It's been a brutal correction, but not as bad as the previous. Bitcoin has declined by 25.39%, less than both prior corrections, and the uptrend remains intact for now. It needs to defend this higher low and avoid forming a lower high. Bounce will come. And I will note that he posted this just hours ago. This is at 2:15 p.m. Central Time, just this afternoon. So look, as analysts that I follow, if a bunch of them keep flipping bearish, I'm not afraid to tell you. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna highlight every single one of them that I notice flip bearish. But it's only been like 3 of them. Maybe 3 or 4. I'd have to think about. Maybe it's been 4. Or it depends on how you classify. Because some are like, yeah, one's like, yeah, it'd be a gamble to think bullish here, like we're going into bear market. I'm paraphrasing there. But then the other ones, they've mostly been I think maybe there's 3, and they've just warned that there's a very serious chance we're entering a bear market. So even they haven't flipped. But anyone that's even talking like that I follow is ignoring macro. Like all 4 of them. And I follow dozens and dozens and dozens of chart analysts. But if I see a bunch flip and people change their mind and things go away that is unexpected, happy to talk about it. I just don't see it. This is not how humans behave. I mean, this is how you'd expect retail to behave. But the smart money acts like smart money in these situations. So we'll see. Then there's also this. This is a great post. This is why, and honestly, and there's a reason I'm talking. Of course, I always talk specifically about XRP stuff because I'm biased. XRP's my favorite coin. Yes, I'm biased. It's my largest individual holding, but I still love to talk about everything else that's happening, including with Bitcoin, because all of that stuff directly impacts what happens with what I actually care about, which is my XRP and the rest of my altcoins. That's the truth. That's the reason that I spend so much time talking about this stuff too. You want the whole picture. You got to understand macro. And so there was this post from Psychedelic, and he's an analyst that I started following very recently, but I've just quickly become a fan of lots of his posts, and he's just clearly data-driven, focusing not just on charts, but also macro. And I'm like, yes, exactly. I wish that more chart analysts would absolutely consider all of the pieces of the puzzle, not just the ones that are chart-related, but all the pieces of the puzzle, including macro, so that you can do your best to come to a reasonable conclusion about what makes sense in the market. And so here he's got this Bitcoin price chart, and he wrote, and by the way, so this is a Bitcoin dominance up top. That's what Bitcoin. Anytime you see BTC.D, that just means Bitcoin dominance. And so if there's a .D after anything, it's dominance for whatever the coin or chart is that you're looking at. And so that's Bitcoin at the bottom here, going back to 2015. And so he says, all coins have begun their outperformance at the exact time that every single person has given up on them. The cycle isn't done yet. How can it possibly be when we still have dominance just under 60% with several very key bearish confirmations? Contrary to what most people think, Bitcoin dominance actually nukes hard as Bitcoin enters its final leg. This is not because Bitcoin is not bullish. It is simply because Bitcoin entering that final leg creates highly bullish conditions for the rest of the market, and they have much further to run. And folks, I'll just say another way to articulate that is markets find bottom. So when Bitcoin starts running for that final parabolic rally, if altcoins have been falling against Bitcoin to a dramatic degree, and on a chart you can see they're at historic lows, well, markets find bottom. So even if you don't know what day, month, week, maybe necessarily the quarter will be that it drops, you can see it somewhere in that range, can't you? If you've got at least one functioning eyeball, you can see it, right? So they've got more room to catch up. That's exactly what he's talking about here. The conditions for the rest of the market, they have much further to run. Yes, that's why. Because they're at roughly historic lows. That's exactly correct. That's why I'm like, we are not done as altcoin holders. We are not done as XRP holders, folks. And he says, you can see that very clearly in this chart. When Bitcoin enters price discovery, Bitcoin dominance drops hard. And you can see what he's talking about. Look at Bitcoin dominance. You can see key levels when when Bitcoin starts going, what happens to dominance when it goes towards the end stage. And by the way, if you're wondering, why is it that Bitcoin dominance to go back last cycle and the cycle before that, why was it higher? Well, very simple. That's because there were way fewer coins. Like, for instance, in 2017, at the end of the year, there was something like 1,600 coins in existence. And now if you go to like CoinMarketCap, they're tracking like tens of thousands of coins. So it was easier for Bitcoin to have a higher dominance percentage in the chart, but it doesn't matter. It's still directionally doing the same thing. Right? So yeah, he writes here, the matter of fact, oh wait, did I skip this? Right here, yeah. When Bitcoin enters price discovery, Bitcoin dominance drops hard. This is all happening at the same time as Total 3/BTC and Total 3/ETH has bottomed and is beginning a reversal. And so Total 3 is the top 125 coins, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. So he's saying when you look at those altcoins and compare that against Bitcoin on the chart, or if you even just compare those altcoins specifically against ETH, saying it's a bottom and beginning a reversal. He says the fact of the matter is this: altcoins are looking more bullish than they have looked in years. We have dominance teetering on the edge of a cliff, totally oversold alts, and alts now finally showing strength against Bitcoin after 3 years. The absolute worst case scenario is that Bitcoin is topped, but alts will explode on its next bounce higher to close out the cycle. Now, folks, that I agree with. So even if the analysts who are saying Bitcoin's in a bear market or about to enter a bear market, however they're wording it now, even if they're right about that, it's silly to think that money's not going to flow into the altcoins. Why would that not? What is the actual argument for why human behavior is no longer human behavior? Please tell me what that is. I haven't seen anyone with a good articulation of that yet. And if I see a good argument of that, I will highlight it on my channel. But you have to show it to me because I haven't seen it, and I don't know what the hell that would be. And I just don't believe it's the case. Anyway, and then he says the absolute worst case cycle. Bitcoin is topped, but alts will explode on its next bounce higher to close out the cycle. The best case is that Bitcoin continues higher into price discovery and altcoins continue to outperform, eventually giving way to the biggest period of altcoin outperformance we have ever seen. Again, is not my opinion. These are the charts. Bitcoin dominance is bearish. Total 3 is bullish. Total 3/BTC is bullish. Altcoins have always run at the end phase of the cycle. So whether that end is coming sooner or later, alts are getting their run. Yeah, I think that's a pretty reasonable perspective. Now, at this point, I'll not be surprised if the market cycle does extend into Q1 or even Q2 of next year, roughly, because, again, I increasingly find Raoul Paul's argument compelling. It's not that this time is different. The thing that is the same is the debt refinancing. That's what controls the timeline. That's the thing. And then time just responds to whatever that is. So this time isn't different if we're extending a whole nother year out even. And then there's this, I'm not going to read this post, but this is also from him, Psychedelic, but you can see this is total 3 priced against Bitcoin. That's pretty freaking low. Going back a span of years, just low, 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 and then starting to show signs of life a little bit here. So take it for what it's worth. Here's a post from Dusty BC Crypto, XRP guy here. Of course, XRP USD on the 8 hour. Same story here. A massive move is still pending. XRP still inside this bearish correction pattern, and we have entered the final phase for quite some time now. Expect a massive move in the coming weeks. We'll continue to monitor. And I'll tell you this, what I do keep seeing that either XRP, this is what I'm seeing from analysts, either XRP has bottomed or it's close to bottoming. I've got some examples showing up here before we close out the video. Here's a post from Chartnerd. He said, the EW5 has gone to plan. Will the line hold to mark wave 5's completion? We're about to find out. And so he's noting, of course, that at least to this point, we're still more or less holding this particular trend line that he thinks is of importance. And this could be the level anyway, where we do break to the upside. And he's not saying it has to. He's noting, like, if we lose $2.20, yeah, you could trend closer to $2. But even on a lower time frame, this is a moment to watch if you're into that type of nitty gritty. But on the higher time frame, he's still arguing nothing is broken. In fact, this point pretty well drives that home. He's still looking at this breakout, what he charted here, $20.46 per XRP. He says, XRP, zooming into the fractal, the bull flag / pennant structure holding above the 2021 highs should not be ignored. $20 breakout target. $2 is foundational support. So he's not wavering on this even one little bit, even if we go lower first. Here's a post from chart analyst Tara, and I think for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the whole post because this video is already going on kind of long here, but she's warning, hey, it's possible you could see XRP get down to $2.05, maybe $1.88. But she seems to be excited that even if that's the case, that should mark the bottom, and you can ultimately have a reversal. And so I've seen that perspective also from tons of analysts. Here's a post from Charting Guy. I actually shared this yesterday, but worth repeating since we're on the topic. He's just noting that he thinks that XRP, stronger coins like XRP specifically, have already bottomed for this current correction. So he thinks XRP's we've already seen the worst of it. So hopefully that ends up being correct. I'd prefer that. But he says for some might take until early to mid-December to chop around and bottom out. And then he says in late January we reevaluate. And so he'll entertain the idea of if we're entering a bear market still, but he thinks that either way, XRP's pretty much bottomed and you're still going to likely see some upward price action. So he hasn't flipped bearish, just to be clear. But he's saying we'll take a look at it. If there's a reason to think that maybe things aren't looking so up, then he's going to give earnest consideration to that. But hopefully it actually has bottom. I mean, markets do find bottoms, believe it or not. They actually do. I was screaming that about XRP throughout pretty much all of 2024, and once you know it, market found a bottom, and then it rocketed higher, went to an all-time high of $3.65, which I was told was never going to happen by some people, the wizards of smart out there, except for it did. Except for it actually did. And this is just a blip on the radar. Nobody's going to remember this. Fast forward a year from now, nobody's going to remember this moment. It's not going to matter. Hell, a year from now, for how Paul's correct, we'll actually be entering a bear market, and then I'll be like, okay, well, now you can scream and panic. No, no, I'm kidding. I still won't be. Anytime we're entering a bear market, I'm still not going to panic. I'm just going to understand that's part of the nature of things, and I'm going to plan for the next bull market. It's going to be fine. It's never a time to actually panic, unless you're a typical living retail speculator, but I don't think that's any reasonable way to live. Definitely not. So no, yeah, it's a critical moment in time, but I still firmly believe the best is yet ahead for this market cycle. But even if I'm wrong about that, which is fine, it's possible. I'm just telling you what I honestly think here, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Even if wrong, I'll still be right if you just let enough time pass, because markets rebound. You'll end up in another bull market at some point in the future, which is why I keep insisting it doesn't make sense to panic here. We are right about crypto. We are right about XRP, and that matters way more than what happens over some short time frame where you wish so-and-so happens. I am not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea.